1, 2, 3, 4.
News,
Culture, astronomy,
physics,
humanities,
space,
science, travel,
Boom! Knowledge! Boom! Knowledge!
history,
humor,
technology.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever the heck hour it is, wherever you are in space or time. And really, we need the intersection of those two things to know for sure, right? Welcome to Boom Knowledge, a podcast with a noble purpose. Well, most of the time anyway, to throw laughs, trivia, in-depth analysis, heady and delightfully superficial discussion both, and of course the big K, knowledge, into a blender, poured into a glass, and served straight up for our mutual education and entertainment. Bottoms up. I'm your generally fearless host, political climates of the moment notwithstanding, of course, Mike Vass, and it is so great to have you here. Welcome to the show. I've been flirting with the idea of today's topic since before Boom Knowledge was even a thing, because among my many and varied interests, which are, of course, so many and so various, I'm a fan of architectural design, particularly as a city boy, but also as someone who grew up with a deep love of science fiction, because structures are cool. But I'm not qualified particularly to speak about this space in great detail. Well, you could probably say that about a number of things I research heavily and chat about anyway, but in this case, why bother? Because I happen to know a talented architect who is also passionate and ridiculously knowledgeable about his craft and the medium of building design overall. His name is Kit Newman, owner and operator at Architect 7600 LLC, and it is my extreme pleasure to build a show with him about building. So let's step away from this lovely introductory foundation I've built and move on into the next phase of a grand structure I'm calling show. It's all solar thermal cladding, self-healing concrete, bioplastics, synthetic spider thread, and a ton of structural 3D printing. Duh. Make sure our tolerances are ridiculously within specification here, and let's raise the roof. And the rest of the building while we're at it too. So I'm excited today because I have with me not only the proprietor of Architect 7600 here in glorious Seattle, Washington, but also quite a good friend of mine with a fascinating background that includes not just architecture, but, well, we share a mutual love of science fiction.
We do.
And futurism in general.
Indeed.
So I have Kit Newman with me, again, from Architect 7600. We have descended through Freddy's Boiler Room together.
We have.
Here in stately Monster Manor. And welcome to the show, Kit.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's really a pleasure to be here. And like I said before, long-time listener, first-time caller. I'm really excited to be part of this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You have been listening to the show right from
I have indeed.
day one.
Day one. And I am always instantly smarter after every episode.
That is high praise. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well deserved.
Well, let's get into it. I think the first thing that I want to know is, and you've shared this with me a little bit just through the tenure of our friendship, but not in any great detail, and what an opportunity to learn. How did you decide to become an architect to begin with? What was the impetus?
The impetus. Well, there is a very specific event that happened early on in my life that we could say was the spark that caused the forest fire, or the pebble that started the avalanche here. Back, I'm going to take us in the Wayback Machine to 1972. And my family were living here in the Northwest, but we were going back to visit family in the Bay Area. And I was 7 years old. And went with the grandparents and the aunts and uncles and mom and dad and the two sisters, and we went into San Francisco for just a day trip to just go around the city, go see Ghirardelli Square and all the touristy attractions. As part of that, we're down by the Embarcadero at the end of Market Street, and we go into the brand new Hyatt Regency Hotel, which had just been constructed the year previously in 1971. And just on a lark, my grandmother wanted to take me in there. So we go in there. Now, this building, if you're not familiar with San Francisco, it's right at the end of Market Street where it comes down to the Barcadero. And it was a brand new building designed by architect John Portman. And it was one of the first of its kind to create the sort of huge interior atrium lobby, which many hotels have since adopted since then. But this was one of the first of them.
And it's still there, right?
It's still there in all its glory.
I have stayed in the Embarcadero fairly recently and have seen the building of which you speak.
Exactly. And it's got the restaurant on the top with the big round thing and all that stuff. But we
definitely stands out in a city full of architecture that stands out.
It definitely does. And especially so at the time, because a lot of the architecture that we see now in modern San Francisco skyline wasn't there yet. So we go in there, and almost immediately I am absolutely agog and thunderstruck at this interior atrium space.
7 years old.
7 years old.
Agog.
Just agog. Eyes like dinner plates. My mind is completely blown away. And I'm walking around in there, and one of the things that I notice is that the atrium is ringed by all of the floors, but on one side of it, all of the floors cantilever out over the one below so as to appear as to be just hovering in air.
Right.
There is no obvious structural thing that appears to be holding them up. They're just hovering there.
Looks like magic to
It looks
7-year-old
like,
eyes.
to a 7-year-old, it's magic. So I'm wandering around, and I'm holding my dad's hand, and he's taking me. And apparently, according to him, he's just watching me very closely through this whole thing. And I apparently sort of stuttered out, "Dad, who thinks this stuff up?" And he said, "Architects do." And I thought for a couple of beats, and I said, "Well, then I want to be an architect." And I have never, since that day, since that moment, never wavered from that goal.
That is incredible.
Everything I have done since that day has been to furtherance of the goal of becoming an architect.
So now I think that makes you well, there's lots of things that make you a unique individual, which is one of the reasons that I love you.
Okay.
But that is really unique. There aren't that many people in the world who you meet that would tell you, well, when I was a kid, I decided, for me, it was, I wanted to be whatever made me the most money, which seems a little shallow at this point.
Well, a lot of people do that.
So I thought, I'll be a lawyer, which would have been a bad choice.
Very bad choice.
But I've gone through several different permutations in my career. But you, laser focused, this is what I want to do.
Laser focused, yeah.
And here we are, like, 15 years later, right? Something?
15, yeah, a little longer than that.
Little longer than that.
But add a few more decades onto that number.
Yeah. And I also know you to be somebody that pays, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes here, but pays real close attention to trends and
I do.
architecture throughout the world and where that's going. Again,
Yeah.
we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that.
Let's talk about the fact that you are now an entrepreneur. You own your own business.
I do. Architect
And
7600.
Congratulations, which is doing great.
It's doing great, better than ever right now.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So what were kind of the events leading up to you deciding to start your own gig?
A lot of things were sort of going on. Up until this point, I had been working with a lovely woman, Lisa Kennenmeyer, working with her, and we worked together for almost 20 years. And
that's a long run.
That is a very long run. And I wouldn't have worked for her that long if I didn't, love the work and love working for her. And we are still very dear friends to this day and keep in close contact. But several things all sort of came together into a focal point in 2012. I had been thinking about kind of going on my own for a while leading up to that point. Always wondering, can I do it? Do I have the chutzpah and the guts to go out and sort of forge my own architectural vision and run my own firm and all that kind of stuff? And that had been beating around in my head.
It takes a certain, something inside you to finally make that leap of faith.
It does.
Because it's much easier to work for somebody else than
my
it
word,
is
yes.
to figure out and make a go of it yourself.
I've never worked harder in my life than over the last 4 years of having my own firm. So.
And that's very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike knows I'm often bitching, oh my God, how am I going to get it all done? How am I going to do this?
And you do anyway.
I do
Good
anyway,
job.
but that doesn't stop the bitching. But in 2012, a few things, there was one thing happened that really sort of crystallized the whole thing, and that was my father's passing. I lost my father in April of 2012, and coming out of that was the realization that we're all mortal. None of us is guaranteed any amount of time on this earth. So if you have a dream, pursue it now. Don't wait, don't delay, don't put it off because you don't know if you're ever going to have a chance. So there was that. Also, through my mother, my father had left me a monetary bequest. So with the money that was left to me, I was able to purchase the very expensive computer I need to run the CAD program. I was able to purchase the even more expensive CAD program to run on the computer. And also have some money just for living expenses while I got the business running. So, friends, connections, and things like that I would get jobs here, jobs there. They would speak to the next person about, oh yeah, you should hire Kit for your this, that, and the other thing. And then a certain sort of churn started to happen, and I've started to get enough people speaking well of me to the next person that then led to the next, which led to the next and led to the next. And now I, am scared to even open my email to find out what new things are going to be coming down there. And I have a flood of work right now.
That's so great. And
it is.
It's lovely when you can be in a situation where you don't have to spend a lot of time and money on marketing.
Exactly.
The marketing is just happening through word of mouth because you're doing good work and good people like what you're giving them.
And the marketers out there have found out about me, and I get calls almost daily from all of them trying to get me to spend money to market. It's like, thank you, no.
Yeah, what's the point?
I've got lovely clients who are speaking well of me to the next lovely clients and the next lovely clients and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you don't have to spend the money for it, why do that?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I want to kind of wind back to something I heard you say that I want to mention because I have some intellectual curiosity about, and because I think it's just so cool, is your CAD 3D modeling.
Oh, yes.
So that's a big part of what you do is you don't just draft anymore. You actually create a model in 3D on a computer.
Exactly. We can, now that we have computers that can do billions and billions of calculations per second, we can fully 3D what they call BIM modeling, building information modeling, where you're basically building a database of the building itself, and you can model it from the land that it sits on, dig out the hole for the foundation, put in the foundation, put the floors on the foundation, put in the walls, put windows in the walls, put a roof on the all that kind of stuff. And I now virtually build the building before anybody else does.
That is so cool.
So that way I can then very easily inform the actual contractor who actually builds the building how to do it, because I've already done it virtually.
And you can check your math, and you can actually give people that you're selling the architectural design to a almost virtual walkthrough.
Oh, not an actual virtual walkthrough. I will have my clients come over to my home office, and I will sit them down in front of my big screen TV, which I can hook up to my computer through my little Apple TV thing.
Right. Here's a glass of wine. Let's walk through your house.
Here's a glass of wine. Let's walk through your house. And so that's exactly what I do. They have wine and cheese sitting there, and I give them a guided virtual tour through the house. And it's an enormously powerful communication tool with the clients.
21st century is winning.
It is totally winning on that score.
That's
totally
awesome.
Winning on that score.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your influences or architects or architecture. We already talked about, of course, the Hyatt in San Francisco.
Yes.
What other people working in the space or who have worked in the space prior, and what buildings have made you go, wow?
Yeah, okay. On the historical end of things, way back in the time, some of my favorite architects are ones who were really also they were also craftsmen or artists and things like that. So one of my favorites is Rennie Mackintosh. He was a Scottish architect who was probably most responsible for what we call the arts and crafts style of architecture, which is colloquially termed as craftsman, but there's another etymology for that term. But he was just a brilliant designer and quite the gentleman. H. Richardson, who was operating out of Chicago in the late 19th century, pretty much the inventor of sort of the American Romanesque style of architecture. If you see like an old brick structure that's got big, heavy, round arches,
absolutely,
and pillars and columns, but then, capitals with some delicate traceries carved into them, that's H. Richardson right there. He did that. Moving forward, mid 20th century modernism really definitely was something I studied a lot in school and drew a lot of inspiration from. So Mies van der Rohe, for one thing, the Seagram's building in New York City is probably his most famous example, and it is one of the most sublime structures of mid-century modernism. And he's the guy who coined "God is in the details," and they very much are. He was an absolute master at making the details such that the building looked as simple and serene and pure as possible. Eero Saarinen, he's the guy who turned concrete structures into the most amazing swooping forms, like the TWA terminal at JFK, Dulles Airport Terminal in Washington, D.C., and he also did the St. Louis Arch. That's probably his most famous structure. And
which is an amazing structure.
It's an amazing structure, yes. And he actually won that competition in competition with his own father, Eliel Saarinen, who was another architect.
Wow.
Yeah, so they both submitted their own submissions, and he ended up winning.
I wonder what that did for their relationship. I hope it was good.
A little, I hear tell it was a little strained at first, but then his father finally came around and was proud of his son for actually having, won the commission and things like that. And it stands to this day and will stand for probably 1,000 years hence.
Sons and fathers, there's already a lot of complexity in those relationships.
Yes.
When you don't add competing each other in a profession.
Thank God I never had to compete with my own father about anything.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then on the residential end of things in mid-century modernism, the Eichler homes in California, and he actually was an architect. He was a developer, but really developed a very distinctive that California low-slung modern tract home style that you see.
The Rambler.
The Rambler, yes, yeah. And you see it throughout the Bay Area. You see it in Southern California.
I've lived in quite a few Ramblers in my life, both living in Reno, Nevada. It's lousy with them, or at least it was at the time I was there. And then also living in the South Bay area is just Rambler heaven. Oh yeah,
exactly.
And I have an affinity for those, even though I live in a lovely Craftsman at this point, which is also a nice looking house. Those Ramblers, that's my kid experience.
My relations down in the South Bay area lived in one of those too. So I come by this honestly as well.
Let's talk a little bit about trends in architecture in general. And I'd like to talk about some of the things that you're seeing, pop up either locally here in the Pacific Northwest or just around the world from an architectural building perspective. And because you and I, again, are sort of amateur futurists, I would love to, take a look into the crystal ball.
Okay.
And perhaps
happy to do that. With you.
See what we see in the future for architecture, some of the fantastical.
We're getting there very quicker than you think.
That's great.
One trend that I see happening globally, and I think a lot of people are seeing it, is we have entered into the area of the super tall skyscraper. Skyscraper has been built for many years now, but now we're getting to the point with both engineering, cost of land, and other economic forces is that we are building
up and up and up,
ever taller. And a super tall building is classified as any structure that is over 300 meters tall.
Wow.
Well, but now we have structures that are pushing 600, 800 meters,
That's
with the Burj Khalifa,
nuts.
the Kingdom Tower in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, that's under construction right now.
That part of the world is really leading the way.
Most of the super talls are in
reaching for the
the
heavens.
Middle East or in Asia, especially China. I mean, China needs them. They are building as fast as they possibly can. So yeah, the super tall, and Seattle may get plans in the works for Seattle's first super tall tower that would be about another 150 feet taller than the tallest building, the Columbia Tower here, and built right in front of it. So
take that, Columbia Tower.
Take that, Columbia Tower.
Suck our height.
Yeah, exactly. But not only will it be taller, it will be significantly more slender than that building. So its height to width aspect ratio is going to seem impossibly thin. And now
that sounds like it's going to look amazing.
It's going to look amazing. But towers like this have already been built in New York, and they're going in cities around the globe and things like that.
One of the things that's prohibitive for us, or at least has been, and I don't know if it's actually prohibitive or it's just people's perspectives, but is the fact that our flight path, generally planes coming in, landing at SeaTac, go right over downtown.
Goes right over downtown, because downtown and the runway of SeaTac Airport are almost directly in a straight line with each other.
Right.
So yeah, so the FAA actually did say you have to cut some of the height down off of this new proposed tower. So it was originally planned to be 1,111 feet tall. Now they've knocked it down to 1,029 feet.
Doesn't seem like that big a difference to me.
Not that big of a difference, but if it means
X%
Alaska
more
Airlines
safety.
doesn't clip a wing on the top of it as it's trying to come into a land, then fine.
That's a bad day when that happens.
That's a bad day when that happens. Things like
Right.
that. Yeah, but it should be, if done well, and I wish the architects, LMN local architects here who are working on that, I wish them well on making a rather stupendous, addition to our skyline.
Yeah.
So.
Which has changed a lot even in the time I've been here.
And is changing more than I've ever seen it changed. Like I said, I've been back here since the 90s. We had a big building boom in the sort of middle to late 80s, where much of the tall buildings of downtown were built. But now we're building them all over again. We're rebuilding downtown like twice over simultaneously.
So I do want to get to the rest of the world,
Yes.
but just to give people a picture, Seattle is one of the fastest growing cities in the entire nation by any metric.
By any metric, it is the fastest growing.
Yeah,
we have more sky cranes on our skyline than even New York City.
Right, and that's where I was going to go, is that our beautiful skyline is these buildings, but a lot of cranes.
A lot of cranes.
Which they throw lights on to make look more interesting.
Which they didn't used to do before, but now...
It's so many.
During the holiday season, our skyline was illuminated with every color of the rainbow.
That's right.
With, big, huge LED rope lights all along the shaft of the tower and all along the boom of the crane and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the rest of the planet.
Now, in the actual construction end of things, one of the things that's happening now that we're at a rather nascent stage is 3D printing of actual buildings. Now that we have these little desktop 3D printers and we can design anything and make all that stuff, they're actually working on large-scale 3D printers of buildings themselves.
Wow.
So it would be this big, huge frame with a big, huge armature and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the early experiments are in concrete construction, where the printer head is extruding a concrete sort of line all around, and then it builds it up and keeps going around, and how in a concrete, you just keep building it up, and so that's what they're doing there with specially reinforced concrete. And then they're on a slightly smaller scale, but it will go big scale. We're also doing this in steel. There are some I know there's some Danish architects, I can't remember their name, who are experimenting with building a bridge where the robots on either end with these welding heads can basically go and put beads of steel to create the bridge from both sides and work their way into the middle until they join in the middle. And because this is all done by computer and things like that, the forms that you can get out of this are absolutely mind-boggling, and things that you wouldn't even attempt to do by just cutting individual pieces and trying to weld them together and put them together. So
because your tolerances are just
the tolerances
incredibly
are
small.
Incredibly small, yes. And we can make curves and swoops and go off at weird angles and all that kind of stuff, because it's just you're actually laying beads of metal all along a pre-programmed path to get you to the final thing. So there's early experiments in small scale structures like a little pedestrian bridge over a brook and things like that, but we're going to get to the point where large scale infrastructure can be created this way.
Right, that allows for more intricacies, certainly more safety, because we have robots building things where people are not climbing around.
Think like the robots that they use in the automotive industry to build things, but those on an even bigger scale to then take that same kind of construction technology and apply it towards buildings, towards bridges, towards roads, and all that kind of stuff. So another thing is green buildings. And when I say green buildings, I'm not talking about sustainability. We're doing that, better energy and efficiency and less use of certain materials that cause more CO2 to go into the atmosphere. I'm talking about literal green buildings where the buildings are incorporating nature and growth and plant matter into the very fabric of the building. So there's explorations on vertical farms and agriculture where it's basically a skyscraper that looks like it's just got trees and growth going all the way up to it, and they are growing food there. Or, we could have an apple orchard, but instead of going laterally, we're going up into the air. They're already doing it in certain cities, like in Singapore has got a structure that's like that. So incorporating nature and greenery into the structure itself, so the two become sort of a cohesive whole, is a definite trend that we see going on here.
Wow, it's about time.
It is.
Because historically, we've just revamped our environments with metal and concrete.
We paved over paradise.
Exactly.
So now we have to bring the paradise back to the pavement. And I think that's what we're going here. So, and we're doing things where, that greenery will use the CO2 locally and turn it into free oxygen and all that kind of stuff. So, and then hand in hand with that, there is also a trend towards biomimicry, where structure and things that plants do, we're going to make buildings do. So we're working on ways to make a building, turn CO2 into oxygen rather than a plant doing it, and analyzing how plants and nature uses the sun's energy so efficiently and creating all of its nutrients and needs and giving off free oxygen. We're gonna work on ways for buildings to do that as well.
Gobbling up carbon.
We gotta gobble up
buildings.
carbon. We gotta gobble it up, because we are in a world of hurt if we don't start 3 decades ago.
Right, if we don't start way in the past, when you and I were born.
We don't, yes, exactly. So there's no time to waste. So along that lines, there's a lot of advances that are happening in the energy, in the capture and storage of solar energy. So, we have Elon Musk to thank for much of this with his, so he's developed the new solar energy roof where it looks like regular slate roof tiles or something like that, but there's actually an embedded solar cell in it. So your entire roof surface becomes one giant solar panel. And then that feeds into a Tesla Powerwall. And so you can have a house, a regular suburban house that could be off grid and get completely 100% renewable energy.
I think I read, it was last year, it might have been Paris, that was no new buildings can come up unless they have some sort of solar energy paneling associated with them.
Paris
some places, some districts have actually mandated this as a thing.
And they are also along that green roofs as well. So they want their roofs to have green plant matter and solar and all that kind of stuff.
Fantastic.
It's really a new golden age for what we can do with the technology we have, the engineering skills that we have now, the materiality sciences that are going on. It is just the forms and shapes and heights to which we will be able to build the sky's the limit.
Kit, it has been the deepest pleasure
to
have you here.
Good. I'm so glad.
So enjoyable.
This has been fun
to hear about all the cool stuff that's happening in building making throughout the world. It's
yes.
Fabulous.
You're so welcome. It was such a pleasure to do this.
Friends, we have journeyed together once more to the inevitable end of another episode of Boom Knowledge. If you enjoyed what you heard, well, there is so much more where that came from. In addition to interviews, I also jam on well-researched topics across the realms of science, technology, humor, art, food, travel, and so very much more. 1 part education to, if I'm lucky, about 5 parts entertainment. Check it out by hitting the subscribe button, either in iTunes or Stitcher, or from your favorite device and feed. You can also find my show on Facebook and Twitter, simply by searching for Boom Knowledge. I have a website as well, www.boomknow.com, that's BoomKnow. And all of these places are perfectly acceptable ways to contact me with feedback, show ideas, and submissions, or just to say hi. Email works as well, mike@boomknow.com. Stay smart and sexy out there. Go out and marvel at some architecture. There's plenty to be adored in the world. And I will hopefully see you in a few days in the future.
Boom Knowledge.